Hello everybody and welcome back to a new video in this GitHub series. In the previous video, if you remember, I have talked about how to create a Git repository locally on your system. And if you didn't watch that video, I advise you to do so by clicking on the link that will appear on the upper right corner. And for this video, I'm gonna be talking about how to create a remote repository on GitHub on the cloud. And this is useful if you want to work with other teammates and if you want to create a backup for your work on the cloud. And I'm gonna show you how to create a connection between the locally created repository and the remote one. So without any further ado, let's get started. The first thing I'm gonna do is to open a browser page and head to github.com. I'm assuming at this level that you are already that you have already created an account on GitHub. If you didn't do that, please go ahead and sign in using your credentials. I'm gonna enter my authentication code that appears on my phone. And right now we are in. So I'm gonna press on this button with a plus sign to create a new repository. And here we're gonna specify some parameters related to our new repository. So first thing, you have the option to start with a template for the content of your repository. This can be, for example, provided by your company or your organization if you're part of that. If not, you can start with no template. Now here, this is the owner of the repository. Now here, you can specify the name of the repository. It's gonna be my first repo. And then I'm gonna provide a brief description. This is my first repository. So for the sake of this video, I have created like this description and name. But if you are working in a project, please make sure to choose a descriptive name and provide a thorough description. Also, you have the option to create either a public or a private repository. It depends on the nature of your project. Do you want other people on GitHub to access your repository or not? Also, you have the option to add some files that are common in any GitHub repository. I have talked about this in the first video in this series. So you have the README file that will provide instructions for the users to know how to use your GitHub repository. You have the .ignore file that will filter the nonsense while you push your modifications from the local repository to the remote one. You can add a license to protect your work. Let's say I'm gonna choose Apache license. And you can see here, they said that the main branch will be used as default. And this is the only branch that will be created at the beginning. So let's create the repository now. And as you can see, right now you have your own repository. There are many files in here. You have the license, you have the README, and you can add your own project files. And you can see the main branch in here, and this is the only branch actually. You have only one branch, as I mentioned. You have many buttons. Feel free to explore them. I'm gonna go over the essential ones in this video that are going to be useful for us. So this button in here will be very useful. If you press on it, you will see the information related to your repository. So you have the HTTPS link and you have the SSH link. And these two links can be used to create the connection between your remote repository and your local repository. And I'm going to show you how to do them. And I'm going to show you how to do that. So these are just two ways to create the connection, but they have the same purpose, okay? Now, the other thing is the option to download the repository as a zipped file. This is not advisable because this will only download the content of your project on the repository without the version control part. If you are planning to do so, by any means do that, but if you want to perform version control to track your work, you shouldn't download this. You should like clone using the links provided in here. And I'm gonna go over the cloning process later on in this video, don't you worry about it. So now we know this information. You can see the name of your repository, the name of the owner. Now, let's go back to our previously created Git repository locally on the system. It was GitHub repo, if you remember. So in this folder, I have included some Python scripts, and you have the .git folder that will contain the documents needed for the version control. Let me open a terminal window, and then in here I'm gonna go over some commands that are useful to create the connection between the local repo and the remote one, and that will be useful also to navigate this connection. So let's start by creating the connection. So I'm gonna add the remote repository that I have just created to my local Git repository. Okay. So the way to do that is by using git remote add. I'm gonna specify the name of the remote repository. I can call it anything. The standard way is to call it origin, but feel free to name it anything you want. And I'm gonna specify the remote repo URL, and I'm gonna head to the page of my remote repository to find that URL. I can press on this button, and in here I'm gonna use the HTTPS link. I'm gonna go over the difference between HTTPS and SSH connections in later videos. I'm not gonna go over that in this video, okay? So I'm gonna stick to the HTTPS. So I'm gonna copy this link and I'm gonna paste it in here. Now you can add as many remote repository as you want. You can link your local repository to as many remote repositories as needed. For example, sometimes I might want to create a connection between one remote repository that is shared with my teammates and another one that was created for a backup. So it depends on your work. So once we press this button, we will create a connection between the two repositories. And to make sure that the connection was created, you can use the command git remote v, which stands for verbose. And this will list all the remote repository connected to your local repository. So here you will see the name, and here you will see the link, the URL for this repository. For any repository that you add, you will have two different links. One is used for pushing, which means whenever you tell the system to push modifications from the local repo to the remote one, the following URL will be used if you specify the name of the repository to be pushed to. So in this case, it is origin. And you have the other link that will be used for fetching. Fetching is the same as pulling. So it's the opposite of pushing. So you are going to transfer the modifications from the remote repository to your local repository. And if you specify origin as the name, the system will refer to the following corresponding URL to do that. Okay, so this is really important. Now let's say that you have changed your mind and you wanted to change the name of your connected remote repository. You can use git remote rename. It's very clear, very descriptive. You specify the old name, in this case it was origin, and you specify the new name, let's say abed repo. Okay, now let's make sure that the renaming really happened. I'm gonna use remote v, and as you can see the name has changed, but the URL is still the same. Now you can also change the URL of your remote repository. So you are going to use git remote set URL. You specify the name, so it is abed repo, and then you specify the URL, the new URL that you want to use. Okay, so let's say I'm gonna open another GitHub repository. Let's say like literally it can be anything. So I'm gonna get this link in here and I'm gonna use it to change the URL. So right now if I list the remote, you can see that the URL have changed, but the name did not change. So I'm gonna revert it back to the initial link. So I'm gonna take this one. And we are good right now. Perfect. Now, if you want to remove this remote repository for a certain reason, you can just like use git remote remove and you just specify the name. Now, the next time you are going to list your remote repository, you won't find anything because it was the only repository over there. Now, let's add it again. With the name origin. And then if you want to see some information, some details about your remote repository, you can use git remote show, and then you have to specify the name. Or yeah, I forgot that I've changed it. Yeah. So as you can see, you have some information like the fetching URL, the push URL. Right now it is saying head branch is main. So what is head? Head is where you are currently in your work on the remote repository in this case. This is like, think about it as a pointer. Now, if we want to transfer our project content inside the local Git repository to the remote GitHub repository that we have just created, we have to do a couple of things ahead of the push. Because right now you have two different repositories with unrelated Git histories, and also you have different type of files in each repo. So we have to do some steps, we have to follow some steps to make sure that these repositories are homogeneous before pushing the modifications from local to remote. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm gonna fetch, which means I'm gonna acquire from the remote all the modifications. I'm gonna specify the name of the remote, which is in this case origin, and then I need to specify the branch, which was called main. Now, if we want to combine the modifications or the files in the remote repository with the local ones, we have to perform what we call a merge process. So it's literally git merge. We specify the name of the added remote repository, we called it origin, and then the name of the remote branch main. And then I need to specifically allow unrelated histories, because as I mentioned, they have separated histories right now. We need to combine them into one. So we should allow in the merge process the ability or the possibility to have unrelated histories. Now you will get a file, and as you can see, you can write a commit message to explain. I'm gonna keep it as merge remote tracking branch because this is a remote a merge process. So no need to add more comments unless you want to. So make sure to save using Ctrl S. You are right now in Nano, and Ctrl X to leave, and automatically the merge process will happen. Merge made by ORT strategy. Whatever that means, we don't care. All what we care about is that the merge process happened. Now, if I remember well, and we can check that with the git log, we have performed an initial commit, if you remember, before doing the merge process. So also let me check git status. These are all commands that I've used in the previous video. You can see that I didn't add the last name script. We had two scripts. I have added only the first name script, okay? Not the last name script. And also notice that right now after the merge process, we have the license and the README file that we previously had created in the remote repository. Now we have them in the local repository. So everything is homogeneous right now. And again, I repeat, the last name was not added to the commit on the local repository. So when I do the push right now, only the first name script that was included in the commit will be pushed toward the remote repository. So I'm expecting only this file to appear on the remote repository. So right now, we have nothing. We have the license and the README. We'll notice the changes after the push. So git push, and we specify the name of the remote repository. It's going to be origin. Now, one last thing is, if you have the name of the remote branch the same as the name of the local branch, this command right now will be enough. But since right now the branch in the local repository is called master, if I remember well, yeah, it is master. In this case, we need to specify for Git, to avoid any confusion, that I want to push the modification from the master branch to the main branch that was on the in the remote repository. Oh, sorry, I forgot to add the name of the remote, really important. Right now, you will be prompted to enter the username and password, but you might think that the password that should be entered is the one that you have used to sign in, but this was removed, was not supported anymore in Git since 2021. Instead, you need to create a personal access token and use it as the password. How to do that? Let's head to our GitHub repository, and then you can press on the photo icon in here. You can go to settings, developer settings. You create a classic token in this case, and then you have to generate a new token. I already have one, but I'm gonna create a new one specifically for this tutorial. You can put some notes to make sure to know what this token was created for. In this case, it's gonna be for tutorial. Set the expiration date. I'm gonna set it to no expiration. And you have many boxes to define what will be the scope of your token. And that means what will be the level, the security level that this token will allow you to access. Okay? What are the things that you can do with your repository using this token? So feel free to explore the different options, but for this video, I'm gonna need only the first box for repo and the second one for workflow. Okay, this all what matters. Now after that, I'm gonna generate the token, and here you will get the token. It will be this long sentence, so make sure to copy it because you won't see it again. So store it in somewhere safe. I'm not gonna do that because this is just temporary for me for this tutorial. But if you're working on a project, you need to secure that in a safe storage. Now I'm gonna paste it, and now the push happened successfully, as you can see. Now if I go back to my remote repository, so let's go back. As you can see, as expected, the first name script.py that was included in my commit locally was pushed to the remote repository. Okay, so we made it so far. Now, what we have done, just to recap, is that we have created a repository locally, and then we pushed it to a remote one that we have created in the browser using our GitHub account. Now, there's another way to do it, which is the recommended way, but I wanted to do both ways so that you will navigate comfortably the GitHub repositories. Now, the way that I would recommend is, instead of creating a local repository, I'm gonna delete everything in here. Okay? Also, I'm gonna delete this. I'm gonna delete everything, okay? What we are going to do instead is to clone the remote repository that we have created in our GitHub account and to the local system, okay? So how to do that? You open a terminal where you want to clone your repository, and you just use the command git clone, and then you use the HTTPS link, and you clone the repository. Now automatically everything that I have done manually before to create the connection between the local and the remote will be done automatically for you when you use this command, okay? So for example, if I check the remote repositories added, sorry about that. So after the cloning process, you need to change the directory to the repository folder that you have created. it will be automatically named after the name of your repo. You can see it also in here. It has the .git that has the documents for the version control, and then you have the first name script, the license, and the README file. Now, if I use git remote v, you will see that the remote repository was called origin by default, and then it has the corresponding link towards the remote GitHub repository for both the fetching and the pushing. Now, let's say that you decided to delete your repository. How to do that? We can simply go to settings in here, and then go down until we see the delete this repository, and you can proceed with the deletion process. You can delete the repository, and once you do this action, it's not reversible. Like, once you delete the repository, be careful, you cannot restore it. I'm not gonna do that now, I'm gonna keep it, but this is just for your information. Alright guys, so I hope you enjoyed this video. If you found it useful, please support this channel by pressing the like button and activating the notification to stay tuned for the future videos, and please make sure to hit the subscribe button as well. In the next video, I'm gonna discuss all about the branching, how to deal with the branches, and how to use them to make your work really efficient in Git. With that, I bid you farewell, and I see you next time.